Welcome to this webinar for preparing for the curriculum change. I am Keith Jones. I'm the Surgical Director of the ICP and my co-chair John Lund, who is the chair of the JCST. Our aim in this webinar is to provide more information about the rationale for the new curriculum. We explain how there's been a shift from a competency approach to an outcomes-based approach. Most importantly, that outcome level is that of the day one consultant in your specialty. We will explain how there's been a critical shift in the way you as trainees are assessed and how we are putting the professional opinion and the judgment of your supervisors at the heart of your assessment. In some ways, it aims to utilise the best of the apprenticeship model without losing the structure of training assessment. We're going to explain what has changed in your specialty curriculum, how it will work, and why we believe the changes will benefit you as trainees. We'll cover how your supervisors will be using the new assessment tool, the multiple consultant report, that's the MCR, to assess you, and also how you can utilise your own self-assessment, which has the same structure as the MCR. There is an updated version of the trial self-assessment that is available on your own ISCP account. We'll show how the self-assessment works and the resulting feedback you should receive. We'll also illustrate about the new learning agreement, which has been modified to help you as trainees stay on track through to the end point of training. And we'll show how that interlinks very closely with the feedback from the self-assessment and the MCR. So this training assumes that you have actually looked at the ISCP website. You may have watched some of the capabilities in practice, MCR and generic professional capability videos that are available on the YouTube site. Hopefully some of you will have already gone through a trial MCR process with your trainers and discuss the outcome with your lead clinical supervisor, having also filled out your own MCR self-assessment and used that as part of the discussions within that feedback. Some of you may also have utilised that self-assessment feedback within your objective setting as with your AES, that's your assigned educational supervisors. So we'll also go through transition to the new curriculum. Hopefully we'll cover all and any of your concerns, showing when you as trainees, irrespective of your level, would need to switch if you do to the new version. Be aware that by August 2023, all trainees will be on this new curriculum. If you have finished your training, i.e. if you're planning to CCT within the next year, then you do not have to transition unless you felt after discussion with your TPD that it was in your best interest. So now we're going to discuss the changes to the new curriculum. You'll see that they are accessible from the front page of the ISCP website. Okay, and now we move to go through the key changes. I'd like to summarise those. When the curriculum comes in online in August of 2021, training will move to being in phases rather than the previous stages. You as trainees will now be assessed by the new assessment format based around the multiple consultant report, which utilises the professional judgment of your trainers in a way that expands on that they do informally at present. The multiple consultant report has equal weighting for its components. That's the generic professional capabilities and the capabilities in practice. The capabilities in practice are the technical and knowledge related skills that relate to your specialty, and they are assessed against that endpoint of training being of a day one consultant. The generic professional capabilities designed by the GMC and the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges, whilst carrying equal weight to the CiPs, are now coming to replace what had been the previous professional skills component of the syllabus. They together, assessed through the MCR, will therefore feed back into your learning agreements, as will your self-assessment, utilising those same structures of the GPCs and the CiPs against the same outcomes. There still will be utilisation of work-based assessments, but that's refocused, looking at the critical conditions and the index procedures, which are actually the certification requirements, and mark your progression through the phases to that end point. The transition to this new curriculum and the timings and the basis around that are also well described within your curriculum, but we will expand on that further later in the webinar. I'd like now to begin the explanation about the capabilities in practice and the GPCs. So before moving through, let's talk about entrustment, because entrustment is embedded into the new outcomes-based approach in the idea that it's how your supervisors feel that you as a trainee can be trusted to perform safely and independently one of those activities on which represents your ability to undertake a role. As you know, trust is essential in everyday surgical practice, and using their professional judgment, your trainers will consider whether or not you can be delegated professional activities and whether or not you have reached a point where you can safely be trusted to perform those to a reasonable chance of success. Your trainer's judgment is guided by information which is often implicit. In essence, can you be trusted at the moment to make critical decisions? Can you be trusted to perform critical procedures? Can you organise activities independently? Or, if unable to, is closer supervision required? Is closer observation necessary for you relating to these activities? Now, basing that assessment on the clinician's global judgments represents a major shift in the way that you as trainees are assessed, although it does actually happen, but in a much more informal way at present. As we move to the capabilities in practice, these are the high-level outcomes that at the end of training make up the job of a day one surgical consultant. There are 5 capabilities in practice which are constant through each of the surgical curricula, these being the ability to manage an outpatient clinic, the ability to manage the inpatients and undertake appropriate ward rounds, the ability to manage the emergency take. That's a generic all-comers emergency take within your specialty. The ability to manage an operating list. That's not just about technical skills, that's globally the ability to run the list and organise it. And also finally, the ability to manage and undertake MDT working. 3 specialties, cardiothoracics, paediatrics and plastic surgery, have additional specialty specific CiPs. For cardiothoracics and paediatrics, that relates to their ability or the need to assess one's ability to manage patients within the critical care environment. And for plastic surgery, it relates to the assimilation of new technologies and advancing techniques. Of equal value within the multiple consultant report are the generic professional capabilities. These will take away or take over from the professional skills within the present syllabus. There are 9 GPCs here represented in the diagrams related to professional knowledge, professional skills, professional values and behaviours. Note, and each of the GPCs has a large number of descriptors that have been designed by the GMC if you feel that there are some aspects for development, but it is likely that the majority of trainees will be seen as appropriate for phase against these GPCs, and when marking this within the MCR or self-assessment, you can move through that assessment tool very quickly. There isn't a capacity to mark excellence within the GPC, but you can make comments within the feedback areas and remain as appropriate for phase. If there are some developments to be raised, those can be utilised in the descriptors, and they also will be clearly represented within the feedback. If your clinical supervisors don't feel they're able to assess you as a trainee in any of the final 4 GPC domains, these would be assessed by your educational supervisor when they feedback about the MCR report. However, it's likely that your supervisors will be able to undertake assessment as they see it related to the clinical representation of those aspects of the professional capabilities. Let us now talk about the training pathway. Within the new curriculum, surgical training will be arranged into 3 phases. That's rather than the present stages. Each phase, be it phase 1, 2 or 3, will have a critical progression point at its end. The critical progression point at the end of phase 3 will be the certification requirements. The details of these critical progression points and of the arrangement of the phases does differ slightly between some of the specialties, and this is clearly represented within the curriculum. The outcome of phase 1 is for the trainee to have gained the competencies equivalent to those described in the core surgical training curriculum, except for cardiothoracics, where there is some linkage into the first years of general higher surgical cardiothoracic training. The outcome of phase 2 is for the trainee to have gained experience in the breadth of the specialty, including the unselected emergency take within that specialty, and including also some early exposure to special interests if those are relevant. The knowledge, clinical and professional skills will be developed to that required of a day 1 consultant at the end of phase 2, such that when completing phase 2 there'll be eligibility to undertake the intercollegiate specialty examination within the specialty. It is expected that whilst technical skills will be developed over the breadth of the specialty, including emergency cases within phase 2, these technical skills may develop more slowly than the development of clinical and professional knowledge and skills, and so will not be at the level of a day 1 consultant by the end of that phase 2. The objective will be that that level will have been reached at the end of phase 3. The outcome of phase 3 is to have gained all the capabilities necessary for safe practice as a day 1 consultant in the specialty. Phase 3 would allow the development by a trainee of technical skills to that level in the generality of the specialty, within emergency care, and where appropriate within any special interest group described within the specialty curriculum. Once these capabilities in practice have been achieved to level 4, that of a day 1 consultant, the certification requirements will have been met and an ARCP 6 can be awarded to allow the trainee to apply for certification. I'll now talk you through the assessment system inclusive of the multiple consultant report. The curriculum assessment system has been rebalanced to accommodate the MCR. It remains an integrated framework of formative and summative assessments. The chart shows you the assessment system, those assessments within the portfolio that all come together to be able to format and inform the assigned educational supervisors report before that feeds through to the ARCP panel. There are mandatory formative assessments that have a summative component, and these are the MSS and the work-based assessments focused on the critical conditions and the index procedures. The multiple consultant report will also be a formative work-based assessment, since it does contribute to a summative assessment. There still are going to be non-mandatory formative assessments that have a summative component, these being assessment of audit activity, the observation of teaching, as well as the utilisation of clinical evaluation exercises and case-based discussions that a trainee may wish to undertake for non-critical conditions, and PBAs for non-index procedures. These work-based assessments may be a response to some of the feedback from a previous MCR and utilised as evidence to show progression against a development target. I hope it's now clear how these assessments will be utilised along with the passing of the examination, how those will then form through the AES, the advice to the ARCP panel to allow progression. So now we're going to look at the multiple consultant report, the MCR, and on screen now is how the MCR appears or as its trial version on your ISCP account at present. So there are 9 GPCs, generic professional capabilities. There are the 5 capabilities in practice, unless you are within cardiothoracics, pediatric surgery, or plastic surgery, when you have your own additional specialty specific CIP. The generic professional capabilities are assessed as to whether or not you are appropriate for phase or required development. The CRPs are assessed by supervision levels represented on the screen now, levels 1 to 5, which range from able to observe only right up to the able to act beyond and above the level of a day expected of day 1 consultant. The MCR is, in many respects, the principal curriculum change. It assesses you as a trainee through the CIPs and the GPCs. It therefore alters the way the formal assessments are made upon you, since your trainers, through their knowledge of you as a trainee, observed on a day-to-day basis, can judge whether or not you are safe to practice in a given area without going through an artificial process of work-based activity as a tick box of competence. The trainers and supervisors make these professional judgments about yourselves as trainees every day, and whilst previously having formally discussed with yourselves your performance, will now utilise this multiple consultant report facility to have those discussions on a more organised basis, and utilising much more the design of the apprenticeship model, whereby the use of the supervisor's professional judgment is made against the trainee's performance. It is likely to feel strange when you have your first feedback session, but that is to be expected because the assessment has worked differently from other curriculum assessments. But you will have also had the opportunity to undertake a self-assessment, and that will form part of the discussion. If we now walk through some more defined aspects of the MCR, it should occur twice per placement. The mandatory aspect is that it needs to occur at least once per placement. The ideal would be a midpoint and an end placement MCR, the midpoint taking place early enough such that you can, as trainees, have points for development that you can develop through the rest of the placement. That midpoint MCR is not mandatory, but it's certainly highly recommended. So how the process works is that you, as a trainee, select the lead CS. That can be done through discussion and some guidance from the TPD or the AES. That TPD discussion is likely to be the objective setting meeting. And whilst the choosing should occur before that meeting, it can be reviewed at that stage, and certainly also the selection of the clinical supervisors can be made at that time also. The clinical supervisors can be changed by yourself as a trainee through the placement, but you do need a minimum of 2 to undertake an MCR. The ideal would more likely to be 3 or 4 clinical supervisors within the MCR. It is not your responsibility as a trainee to lead or drive the MCR process. That is for the lead clinical supervisor. They will be responsible for getting the clinical supervisors together, and certainly that has been part of our champions training to work out how different units would do that, whether they use their local faculty meetings or perhaps have separate meetings on Zoom or Teams. Your AES can be the lead CS, but it's preferable to have different people undertaking those roles, although the roles are in themselves different. That MCR meeting, which must take place, can be either physical or online. The plan and aim is that it reaches a consensus of an opinion about whether the trainee is at the appropriate level for the GPCs and at what supervision level they are for the CiPs, and to highlight any areas for development that can heighten and improve the trainees' development and their pathway to the endpoints of training. If a clinical supervisor could not be present at the MCR meeting, it's been arranged that there is a 2-week window following the meeting during which all supervisors can add or modify comments stating whether they agree or disagree. Subsequently, the AES, who is also able to add in comments and evidence from the portfolio that may well be relevant for GPCs 6 to 9, can also then add in AS-based final comments and sign off the MCR. Once it has been signed off, a feedback meeting between the lead CS and the trainee can take place, again, either in person or online. The self-assessment must be completed by the trainee before that MCR feedback meeting takes place. That self-assessment tool is identical to the MCR. It's your, as a trainee's, self-assessment form, and it will provide the basis for discussion at the feedback meeting, as your lead CS can compare what the completed MCR report says with your own self-assessment. We would advise that you, as a trainee, look to provide insight into your strengths and be honest about what you see as your development needs, because it's likely that that will expedite the achievement of those. The final MCR in each placement will pull through to the next placement What that means is when the objective setting learning agreement is undertaken, they will have direct vision of both the MCR and the learning agreement that was undertaken at the end of the last placement. And so that is a significant improvement to trainee feedback and progression history than that has been undertaken previously. I'm now going to introduce our MCR video. This is a video that I have undertaken with two colleagues. I'd like to thank Ashok Handa and Ginny Bobrick for their help in making this video. The scenario we had used was of a year 6 vascular trainee, so what would be coming to the end of phase 2 within the new curriculum, and therefore looking to obtain an ARCP1 to get sign off to undertake the exam. So that's the time of the trainee within their training pathway, and what we have sought to do is make comments and show different ways that both the GPCs and the CiPs may be undertaken and assessed, different methods for documenting evidence either by descriptors or free text. Our expectation for trainers is that a standard MCR meeting will take somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes. The first time your trainers do it is likely to take them longer as they get used to the format. So I hope you find this MCR video beneficial. I hope now to be able to show with my colleagues Ashok Handa and Virginia Bobrick how we would actually undertake MCR, with me acting as the lead clinical supervisor, and then with my colleagues discussing a trainee. The trainee we've decided to discuss will be at the level of ST6, so this would be their first interim MCR in the ST6 year, which will be the year they're working towards being signed off to take the exam, and we'll highlight some aspects of that training and points for development, which will see them much better placed to be able to take the exam. So that's the focus that we're looking at now. So if we come to follow the MCR, we've decided which placement it is, and we've shown who is taking part, and therefore we will continue. So we go first to the generic professional capabilities, and the first one being the professional values and behaviour. And we do think that there are some areas for development, so we would look at where those stand, the descriptors, and I would counter that managing time and resources effectively is something that this trainee would want to develop, and certainly they want to develop how they do their revision time effectively, but certainly within the workplace they often find themselves running out of time. I suspect there may be a knowledge factor and experience that comes with that, but I would feel, my experience, that that's something that they could develop. Would you agree?
Yes, I'd agree with that. I can't see any other, unless you just scroll down to the other behaviour. Oh, I'd agree with that one. The only other one I might add is the demonstrating situational awareness.
Okay.
Occasionally, which I think does link into the managing time and resources effectively. But other than that, I'm happy.
Is there's any particular aspect when feeding back? Do you think? I mean, certainly I'd agree with you. Particularly, I think in that sort of multidisciplinary. I'm not sure in the endovascular work yet that there's a full awareness of what's going on.
Or when under significant pressure, I think sometimes just losing sight of everything else around and everyone else within that situation.
Yeah, so particularly in those sort of slightly more stressful situations, maybe with an emergency in the endovascular suite. So there is that little bit around situational awareness.
And but do you think there's anything else that you would add in? these aspects, demonstrating awareness of limitations or behaviour. I mean, I certainly don't. I think they're very aware of their limitations. I've had lots of coffees where discussing, and there's a bit of encouragement sometimes, let's say. But I don't think they ever put people at risk.
No,
certainly, I've never seen any patient risk aspects of things.
No, I agree.
Yeah, I would agree. There's no issue around that kind of behaviour, and certainly very good at referring on or seeking advice.
Yes. What about, just as we go, the interacting with colleagues? This is that MDT working as a collaborative member of the team. When things get a bit stressful, do you think that's something that to have worked on, or do you think that's very much appropriate for phase in relation to that?
Yeah.
I mean, so we're talking ST6. They realistically should be sort of indirect supervision levels now. I'd on being comfortable about that, and
I think
it might come back. It might come into the discussion as a feedback.
No, I think taken as a level appropriate. I would say that I would be happy with the level they're at now, but that they do need. Hopefully, they will develop that as they advance through their training.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's right. That I think it's something that, in a way, all of us need to work at all the time. I certainly do. But I think saying that for an ST6, I don't have concerns about that. But in the feedback, that's the sort of thing we all need to work on. Okay,
well, I think I've got. We've just highlighted 2 aspects. You can go up to 5 in each of these domains, but I don't think it would necessarily. I could see how that I would have a clear idea of how I see that discussion going. I'm happy to discuss if there was anything you would raise, but capability in health promotion and illness prevention, I think he's absolutely appropriate for phase. I wouldn't. There's nothing I think I'd expect of any more for him at an ST6 level.
Absolutely, yeah.
We spend most of our clinics telling people to stop smoking and manage their diabetes, and I think he does it very well.
Yeah. And I'd say again about patient safety and quality improvement. I think that he's absolutely in relation to phase, and the same would apply for 7, I think, and 8. I just might wonder, because of what we've been talking about at the MDT, perhaps if we look at the capabilities in leadership and team working, if we look at some of the descriptors, I'm not actually sure that there is an issue, but I wonder about that. Is there any of these you think that fit into how the issues that we've raised about MDT working?
Well, does promoting and effectively participating in multidisciplinary and interprofessional team working fit that? I think that he does achieve that.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly aspects in relation to feedback. I don't think there's anything.
No.
Listen, I mean, I reckon that we could write free text.
Yeah, I think that would be better, because I don't think any of those drop downs actually cover what we're trying to say, because otherwise leadership style is very good.
So in a brief statement in relation to looking to,
I think it's more about awareness of multidisciplinary working when under stressful situations or when pressurized, or,
to be honest, it's more about being able to use your full range of leadership styles. It's much more about that, that sometimes you need to adapt your style to a particular situation or particular group of people. And as you say, Jenny, overall good leadership styles, but not always able to adapt them. I don't know if that's a helpful comment.
I think that encapsulates it. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you saying is to be able to recognise all opinions and options within the MDT working and utilise leadership style to be able to undertake this.
Yeah.
That would.
Great. Okay, so I'm comfortable that with the pattern that's there, and we're happy to move on now.
Yes.
So we go on to the CiPs. That they say obviously these are the general CiPs, and vascular surgery just has those 5 general CiPs. We don't have any specialty additional ones. And for the capability in practice for our curriculum sets the supervision level at ST6 requirement for being 3 for those, the first 3, and then the last 2 are just at level 2 for finish of 6, because we think that the majority of that development is going to be on. So you see that actually he's pretty close to where we'd imagine that he should be, but obviously as we put supervision level 3, we do then need to make some comments of the things that we think he does well, which we can do, and some of the aspects which we think would look for development. I certainly, when I looking through, I would want to tick that. I think is really good at recognising the people with urgent conditions and that would need to come in from the clinic, and he certainly is very good about completing all the necessary documentation of no aspect.
What have you noticed about the time management?
Well, I mean that's the flip, isn't it? It is that actually, whilst it does recognise all those things, it does take time. I don't know if you've ever been in a clinic with him where we've finished early, and certainly there's always a little bit of wait, not hugely, but enough. So I think that's something that could be something to work on.
I was just thinking about the appropriate investigations and not to investigate, and just sort of weighing that one up in my mind, or not, or whether.
Oh, is that when recognising when you should be comfortable that it's not vascular and you can say so. We don't need to go on and do further investigations. I've certainly found that on more than on several occasions. It's pretty common, so I'd be comfortable putting that again. Is there anything else particular? I mean, I know that's taken us up near to the top of the CIPs, but I think that it really incorporates their good aspects and the things to develop.
I think they are, and I think certainly sometimes over investigation just because you don't want to say everything's all right. So that I'm very comfortable with that.
Can I just add one other excellent there, though? I think that one in the middle, the managing potentially challenging situations with having the time to talk and diffuse patients and relatives has been excellent.
Yes,
I found.
Yes, I mean that, to highlight that point about patients and relatives, I think that'll be a positive thing, because that comes acknowledging that he does have the skill set to be able to do that. Now, the management of the operating lists is remembering that his operative skill levels don't necessarily have to be as high as him, and certainly SC6. I mean, he may want to be at 3 across the board, but I think it's much more. I find myself in looking over his shoulder most of the time, I would think. So I put
good improvement in skills and confidence, but still want to be there. I'm not happy to be in the coffee room.
Oh yeah, no, but I think it's gone from an A to a B in a short period of time, and it won't be long before. So I would, I'd feedback, but the part of the aspects of that, I think for me would be about operatively, if there's something when it's not quite as expected, so manage complications. I mean, it does ask for help, and that's good, but it's that recognizing that that could be a little prompter, I suppose.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because at their stage, are they at an appropriate level for recognizing the complications? But
this isn't. I mean, it's not a negative aspect. It's just something for them to work on development-wise. That I think he'll get better quicker if he just concentrate on those non-technical, some of the non-technical skills and situational, because actually, technically, as we say, we've seen him come along really quickly.
But I think on the positive side, very good on op notes and instructions, really clear.
Oh yes, very good, very good. And that one, but
used them all, really on that aftercare.
Yeah, very good. In relation to, so we've got this one. We've in between. We've talked about that. We've fed back to all members of the multidisciplinary team.
We have to highlight that, given the thread that we've developed here. I
think we should. I'm pleased that we're not using the word inappropriate, because I never see him as really inappropriate, so to speak. I just sometimes think you could have done that differently. I might be, not utilising the descriptor as well, but I certainly think that probably encapsulated it. And then the one when we probably highlight most, but I think we've just talked about it most. I mean, I'd see him at 2A. Here, hopefully we've been in agreement. I think under direct supervision, you can certainly guide them. So we're through now. If we save that, finish, that looks like that provides a report which I'll obviously print out. I'm due to meet him shortly, and in the next couple of days, and I feel very comfortable feeding that back. I'll be interested to see what his self MCR shows as well, to see if it matches. I suspect
that's very interesting,
but I suspect it will. They won't be far off.
No, he has insight.
Okay.
You're going to print and submit.
Yeah, I am going to print that, and I'll submit it.
Okay.
Submitting it will close it there. Yeah. The point I would make for those people doing it on the practice one is that once submitted, it will disappear. A shortened explanatory video about the MCR is available as a pop-up video on the ICP website, but also we're showing it linked in the corner of the screen now. If we look now at the feedback that the MCR provides and the advantages that it gives as trainees, the MCR allows for comprehensive and detailed feedback to be given to you. The feedback is relevant to your progress at that point in time. The plan is the MCR will happen regularly, ideally twice per placement. So based on undertaking rolling 6-month placements, that would be every 3 months. Importantly, the feedback provided is a group consensus of professional judgment made by your current clinical supervisors. That consensus feedback is democratic by its nature and is the agreed opinion of the group. The midpoint MCR will highlight areas where development is needed for the rest of that placement, and that will also speed development against the end point of training. This means that any areas of development of the trainee are picked up midway through a placement and not left to go undetected at the end. The feedback session between the trainee and the lead CS could include an action plan for the trainee in specific clinical, technical, or professional skills that then need to be developed. And the necessary support for that development can be discussed by the trainee and the AS as part of the next learning agreement meeting. At the learning agreement meeting, the latest MCR will show within the trainee's evidence. So when the next learning agreement is undertaken, the most current MCR can be visualized by both trainee and the AES. When closing and signing off a MCR, the AES can add comments. Those comments may ensure evidence that is presented elsewhere within the portfolio is represented within the MCR. Because the feedback is a group professional judgment, the views themselves can't be challenged or changed by the trainee, much in the same way as you can't change an examiner's views. However, the MCR should be providing descriptors or comments that show the rationale for the advised development needs. If a trainee is unhappy or wants to express views in disagreement against the MCR and the feedback, that can be undertaken at the feedback meeting to the lead CS. It could be undertaken at a meeting with the AES, or if necessary, to the training program director, or indeed utilising the liaison SAC member if necessary. I'd now like to talk about the self-assessment component of the MCR. It is exactly the same as the MCR, except you as a trainee are assessing yourself against the same standards as that the trainers have assessed you. The same agreements apply in that one is mandatory through a placement. You're going to have to perform an end of placement self-assessment. That self-assessment is a way of realistically describing your level of competence and a way to reflect upon what your development needs may be. You will take your self-assessment to the feedback session with your lead CS, and that self-assessment can be compared to the MCR and allow developmental plans to be made. In future, once the MCR and learning agreements have gone live on the website, the self-assessment will contemporaneously be present when the next learning agreement is set along with the MCR.
Self-assessment. After logging into your ISCP account, you go to the Trial MCR link at the top right of your screen. So clicking on this link, you'll see an acknowledgement pop-up window. As this is a trial only, your work will not be saved, so please print off your self-assessment if you want to save it. Self-assessments done on this trial version will not be taken into consideration for any formal assessment, such as the ARCP. After August 2021, when the new curriculum will be formally introduced, all self-assessments will be saved and become an integral part of the learning agreement and assessment process. You can acknowledge this by clicking on this link. It now brings you to your placement page. You can click on your current placement and then click Create Self-Assessment. On the first page, you can see the GPCs. There are 9 domains of professional behaviour that every doctor in the UK must adhere to. For every GPC, there are 2 markers of assessment. 1, appropriate for phase, and 2, area for development. For each of the 9 GPCs, there are many descriptors. So, beginning your self-assessment, you can click, for example, on the first GPC, number 1, Professional Values and Behaviours. If, for example, you believe that you have trouble with time management, you could mark this descriptor, Managing Time and Resources Effectively. You could click there. You can see that it's been clearly marked and recorded as an area of development. You can write some text in the box or you can leave it blank. Now, looking at the other GPCs to see if there are any other areas you need to develop. So, for example, if you think you need to develop team working skills, you could click on GPC number 5. Capabilities in leadership and team working. To find a descriptor to match team working skills, you could either look through all the descriptors or you could type in a keyword search. I'm going to type in team. This descriptor here aligns, actively participating and contributing to the work and success of a team. I'm going to mark that there as an area for development. Again, you can see it here as clearly marked as an area of development. You can write comments again in the box or you can leave it blank. For example, you could write some comment to assist your development in team working skills. Remember, the more information you give on your self-assessment, the more your clinical supervisor will understand how you see your own development as a surgeon and what your training needs are, and therefore what kinds of support you need. It's important to remember that if you mark a descriptor as an area of development, it does not necessarily mean that you have failed in any way or that there is a concern. Rather, it shows that you have insight into your learning needs. After going through all the GPCs, you can click Save and Continue at the bottom of the screen. Now you can start to fill in the capabilities in practice, or CiPs. There are 5 shared CiPs for all specialties. 3 specialties, paediatric surgery, cardiac surgery, and plastic surgery, have extra CiPs for their own specialty-specific areas. Capabilities in practice, or CiPs, are the broad-level outcomes of the new curriculum. Let's look at the first CiP, number 1, manages an outpatient clinic. Like the GPCs, there are many component skills called descriptors. Here, the assessment markers are either D for development needed or E, area of excellence. And again, as in the GPCs, you don't have to assess yourself against each of these descriptors, only the ones where development is needed or ones where you believe you are demonstrating excellence. For each of the 5 CiPs, you can select up to 5 descriptors. Any more than that may be overwhelming. After all, the aim is to build competency and progression during this placement. For example, you may decide that this descriptor needs developing. Completes all required documentation. If it needs developing, you can mark this one here. However, you also know that you are good at this descriptor. Selects patients with urgent conditions who should be admitted from clinic. You know you are very good at recognising urgency. You can mark this as an area of excellence. Here you can see the 2 areas clearly marked. This area for development completes all required documentation, and this area of excellence selects patients with urgent conditions who should be admitted from clinic. In the free text box, you could give some evidence to back this up. You could add that if some patients have told you their appreciation and that you acted quickly for them. Now that you have completed the descriptors in CiP number 1, you need to assess your supervision level. The supervision level indicates to what extent you believe you'll need to be supervised by your clinical supervisor while undertaking this CiP. You can click here. The supervision levels in Roman numerals range from 1 to 5. Numeral 1, able to observe only, through to 5, being able and trusted to act the level beyond that expected of a day 1 consultant. It's important to note that you must mark what you believe to be a realistic supervision level in each CiP against the benchmark of a day 1 consultant and not against what's expected at your own phase in training. And again, remember that a low supervision level does not necessarily mean a failure or a concern. It indicates what level of training you are currently at. It signposts how you can progress and improve during the placement. For example, you might consider yourself now at supervision level 3. You can mark 3 here. If the supervision level is less than 4, you must provide more information in the text box. This completes the process for CiP number 1. It's the same process for all the other 4 CiPs. So, after going through all CiPs and marking the supervision levels, you can press Save and Continue at the bottom of the screen. A summary page can now be seen, showing a summary of everything that was marked, each assessment level made, each descriptor marked, plus any comments written in the text boxes, for both the GPCs and the CiPs. When you're satisfied that it's an accurate account of your competency level of your phase of training, you can press the green box at the bottom of the screen. Submit self-assessment. Once submitted, the report is no longer editable. This self-assessment report and the MCR will be the basis of the discussion in your feedback meeting with the lead clinical supervisor. So we press Submit here. You have the option to print this summary by pressing here. The process of self-assessment is now complete. As you become familiar with self-assessment, the process of marking the GPCs and the CiPs and writing comments will become easier. and it can therefore be completed in less time. Once familiar with the process, it need take no longer than 15 to 20 minutes to complete as a rough guide. In summary, a self-assessment is an honest and realistic account of your current skill levels, both for the GPCs and the CiPs. There's no need to assess all descriptors in both the GPCs and the CiPs. Only those areas where development is needed, or, in the CiPs, where excellence is demonstrated. Areas for development are signposts for future progress and do not necessarily indicate concern. The trainee can show areas of excellence in their self-assessment. Providing backup evidence to show is helpful. Supervision levels must be rated against the benchmark of a Day 1 consultant and not at the current level of the trainee. The completed self-assessment and the MCR report together will form the basis of feedback discussion at your MCR meeting with the lead clinical supervisor. And importantly, the self-assessment is an integral part of the whole learning agreement process and will assist you in your training progression.
Now, having watched the self-assessment video, I hope you see how it is a good way to reflect about yourself as a trainee and your competence as a trainee surgeon, and also see how it's important to think how others may view you and whether or not they view you as a competent surgeon and what your points of development may be. It's important to be able to look at yourself through the components of the generic professional capabilities and the capabilities in practice. We hope there are many benefits to you as a trainee in undertaking the self-assessment. Certainly it develops your ability of reflection and self-insight. It develops an honesty in your abilities and personal qualities, and to review your own skills, and therefore give you a better understanding about how you act as a surgeon, and indeed maybe as a person. It can develop your knowledge of your training needs for now and in the future. When filling out the self-assessment, you can also enlist helpful advice from others. You're going to fill out the form, but you may discuss how others see yourself. What you can do at a later date, once you have several self-assessments and MCR's feedback, is go through and reflect to see how you have progressed, and therefore plan and show what you may need to do, whilst understanding how best you develop, what your learning style may be. The completed self-assessment forms will form the basis of your discussion with the lead CS in your feedback meetings, and you may want to utilise them as areas of exploration and comparison with the feedback that the lead CS gives from the MCR. And this is very important at this stage. The self-assessment can act as a gap analysis as you record how COVID experiences have affected your training over the last year to 18 months and help create a plan to catch up. At this stage, we now look at the learning agreement, and we see how both the self-assessment feeds into the learning agreement process and forms the basis of discussion between the trainee and the lead CS, that feedback session. We show that the learning agreement is key to the trainee performance in the MCR, because it sets out what the trainee has to learn, how they learn it, and how they'll be assessed. The learning agreement is also an important initiator for the sequence of assessments, so it will play a key part in the MCR. So in essence, we're highlighting how interactive the learning agreement will become between the MCR and the objective sessions. Certainly the MCR will feed into the learning agreement, and the learning agreement will help ensure that the trainee closes the loop on areas that have been flagged up by the previous MCR. We've made some really quite important changes to the learning agreement, which we hope have both simplified it and made it relevant for the capabilities in practice and the generic professional capabilities. We've got a video which we're going to play now, which shows how this self-assessment form feeds back into the learning agreement process and also forms the basis of discussion for the lead CS in your feedback session. We're going to play that video now.
An improved version of the learning agreement is being introduced for surgical trainees with the new surgical curriculum from August 2021. This guide describes how it will change, how it should be completed, and how it will work with the new Multiple Consultant Report, or MCR. The account detail and data included here are for illustrative purposes only. What you're seeing on the screen here is the point in the process where the trainee has created a new placement, making the new learning agreement available. This page lists all learning agreements and shows their status. New style learning agreements are displayed in shades of purple, while older ones are in grey. As each learning agreement meeting becomes available and is completed, its tab colour goes darker. Unfinished older versions can still be accessed and completed along with the new. It's only trainees who can create learning agreements. To start, click Create Learning Agreement to move to the next stage. The learning agreement and MCR are designed to work in conjunction with each other. This progress summary has been built into the learning agreement as a guide to the critical assessment points within a placement. As each stage of the learning agreement or MCR is completed, the next stage becomes available. And this part of the video is an overview of how these stages fit together. Training program directors, assigned educational supervisors, and clinical supervisors will be alerted as relevant at each stage. The first task is to select a lead clinical supervisor or lead CS. When that's completed, the objective setting meeting can be filled in. When the objective setting meeting has been signed off by both trainee and AES, the midpoint MCR and trainee self-assessment become available. The MCR and trainee self-assessment at the midpoint are optional in the system, but very strongly recommended for training purposes. Because they're optional, the midpoint learning agreement can take place regardless of non-completion of the midpoint MCR and trainee self-assessment, or either. But both should be completed. When the midpoint learning agreement has been signed off by both trainee and AES, the final MCR and trainee self-assessment become available. These are mandatory so that the final learning agreement cannot take place without their completion. AES and trainee sign-off of the final learning agreement meeting, which has been combined with the AES's end of placement report, is the end of the process, when the learning agreement is completed for that placement. When you select the icon for the lead CS, the next screen will show the names of trainers the trainee named as CSs in this placement. So it's important that trainee placements name all CSs so they're all included in the MCR. There should be at least 2 CSs for the MCR to be viable, and there's no maximum number. When AESs act as CSs, it wouldn't be ideal for them to be selected as the lead CS because the 2 roles have separate oversight of the MCR. Select one of these names as the lead CS. The person selected should have agreed in advance that they will take on the role, so that it won't be a surprise when they receive an alert on their ISCP dashboard along with guidance about the steps and responsibilities for doing it. Click the green button to save your choice. The objective setting meeting is now ready. The lead clinical supervisor can be changed at any time throughout the placement by either the trainee or AES. And the people concerned will be informed. And a history of people who've been selected as lead CS will be displayed. Back to the progress summary. Now that the objective setting meeting is ready, it will show as work in progress on the trainee's dashboard, and the AES will see an alert on their ISCP dashboard so that they can access it too. To start the objective setting meeting, click on the objective setting icon. This first page is a cover page. Select the date on which the meeting was held, not the date when the form was completed. The Training Programme Director's global objective will be visible. Click More to see the entire text. A new feature lower down is a display of the key details from the trainee's most recent ARCP, providing an opportunity to take account of any wider impact on the trainee's progression. Save and continue. On the next page, this breadcrumb trail and this progress bar are additional navigational aids allowing you to keep track and maintain awareness of your location in the learning agreement. You will need to complete each page in order, but after that, using the breadcrumb trail, the progress bar, or buttons at the bottom of the page, you can go back and forward to any page. And you can see the initial progress summary at any time. This first page is dedicated to the trainee's generic professional capabilities, or GPCs. Because GPCs are essential capabilities that underpin professional medical practice, they must carry equal weight to the CiPs. You can view what the latest MCR and trainee self-assessment said about the trainees' GPCs before considering objectives using this selection of views. You can view by just the GPCs rated as areas for development, just those rated as appropriate for phase, all GPCs, or one GPC category at a time. I'll choose GPCs by areas for development. What's now displayed on the left is the latest MCR, and on the right the trainee self-assessment, allowing comparison. However, please be aware when using the learning agreement for the first time from August, because the first MCR will only be started at the midpoint of the placement, it won't be visible in the first objective setting meeting. But as long as the midpoint MCR takes place, it will be visible from the midpoint learning agreement onwards and thereafter. So it's important that the midpoint MCR takes place in time for the midpoint learning agreement meeting. Each of these short texts is a descriptor selected in the MCR or in the trainee self-assessment, and there may be comments underneath. These areas can be compared and discussed in the meeting, making it easier to focus objectives around the trainee's progression through the GPCs. Further down are two mandatory text boxes that need to be filled in. And these tabs show that as the learning agreement progresses throughout the placement, each meeting will be available in a separate tab, one for objective setting, one for the midpoint review, and one for the final review. The first text box asks what GPC objectives the trainee should be aiming to achieve over the next 3 to 6 months to aid their development. The second text box is also important. It requires consideration about what support and help the trainee will need to achieve those objectives, and the trainee might have a view on what might be needed here. You might want to draw on some of the descriptors and comments from the MCR and trainee self-assessment above. You can copy text from here straight into the objectives box by clicking on the crosses next to those texts. This populates the text box, and you can modify the wording if necessary. save and continue to move on or to come back to later. Now that the GPCs are done, we can move on to the CiPs, as shown in the progress bar. Unlike the GPCs, which are dealt with as a whole, each CiP has its own objectives page. The 5 shared CiPs are shown here, but cardiothoracic surgery, paediatric surgery and plastic surgery will show additional specialty-specific CiPs. We're on CiP 1, Manages an Outpatient Clinic. There's no need to filter the view, the whole MCR and trainee self-assessment are automatically displayed. You can see the supervision level set, comparing it with the trainees view, areas for development, areas of excellence and comments. Again, there are crosses next to the texts to populate the mandatory objectives box. When thinking about objectives and how to achieve them, it's worth discussing with the trainee their preferred learning styles and the kind of action that will help. Would it be better for them to work on their own with guidance and a plan, or with others in a study group or in role play? Would it be useful to guide them with diagrams, videos, activities, or book learning? There should be action for change to occur. There should also be the necessary reflection, or learning may not stick. Even with this, trainees may need help understanding the bigger picture, so discussion with a trainer may be needed. And the trainee's view is very important, of course. And all objectives should be SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timed. Keep going like this through each CiP page, saving as you go. When the GPC and CiPs pages have all been worked through, all the content is displayed in a summary page. This provides an overview of the whole meeting, and you can modify the content here and it will change the previous pages accordingly. When finished, click Save and Continue. The final page of objective setting is the sign-off page. There's a space for trainee and AES to make their final comments. Then they can sign off separately or together by the AES adding their password. Then click Sign Off. That's the end of the objective setting meeting. The midpoint and final meetings are exactly the same with some additional questions, and the AES report is combined with the final review meeting. In summary, this video has shown how the learning agreement will change, how it should be completed, and how it will work with the new MCR. The learning agreement and MCR work in conjunction with each other. Each stage becomes available as the previous stage is completed. The lead CS for the MCR is selected at the beginning of the learning agreement. The latest MCR and trainee self-assessment are visible within the learning agreement, and descriptors from them can be easily added as learning objectives. The learning agreement has been streamlined so that the AES report and final review meeting are combined. Overall, the new learning agreement should make it easier to focus objectives on the achievement of GPCs and CiPs, directing progress towards readiness for day one consultant practice.
Thank you very much indeed. So I'm just going to put up this slide now that highlighting that pathway, the progress through the learning agreement. One of the things I really like about the learning agreement now is the way to highlight up the trainees' preferred learning style. And I think that's really important for their development and to see that being recognised and plans made accordingly. listen, but we recognise that this is a major change. We're going to now, John's going to take us through some of the aspects about transition, which raises normally a lot of questions, but I think this next bit will answer the majority of those. So John, I'm going to hand over to you.
So transition to the new curriculum. The curriculum is going to start on the first Wednesday in August 2021, so not far away. If you are starting on a new curriculum, so you're CT1, ST1 or ST3, then you will start following the new curriculum from day one. If you are going into the final year of a programme, so CT2, ST2 or ST8 or ST7 if you're in urology or OMFS, then you can stay on the old curriculum. You can choose to transfer to the new curriculum if you're in that last year of training at ST7 or ST8 with conversations with your programme director and can move across if that's advantageous to you or helpful to you in some way, but only with consultation with your training programme director. If you aren't starting or entering the final year, then you move across to the new curriculum at the turnover of your training year. So most trainees will start on a new curriculum or start following new curriculum from the first Wednesday in August or the equivalent or the first Wednesday in October 2021. If you're less than full time, then you don't have to move to the new curriculum until the completion of your whole time equivalent training year. So for ease of illustration, let's say that you are 50% less than full time. You're halfway through your whole time equivalent training year in August 2021. Then you wouldn't have to move to new curriculum until you completed that training year in August 2022. However, lots of less than full-time trainees are quite a way ahead of their chronological progress through training in terms of their competence. And you might want to have a discussion with your TPD about moving to the new curriculum to reflect this acceleration compared to your chronological time in training of your competence. And so you can choose to move to the new curriculum before the end of the whole time equivalent training year, although you don't have to. All trainees must move across to the new curriculum by the 2nd of August 2023.
Thank you, John, for describing the requirements for transition. There is also a supportive transition video available as one of the pop-up videos on the ISCP website and also via the link in the corner of the screen now. We'd now like to highlight some of the main and common challenges respect to the implementation of the new curriculum for you as trainees. Clearly, for you, you will see the use and your acceptance of the self-assessment components of the MCR as being a new challenge. I hope we have been able to reassure you that the allocation process for your lead CS will be straightforward and supported by your AES. I would remind that it's not the clinical supervisors that are driving the MCR process, it's the lead CS. You do not have a role in driving that process. There will be a challenge for us in ensuring that there is attendance of face-to-face or online meetings with the lead CS by all the clinical supervisors to undertake the MCR process. But hopefully this will evolve into the norm. We do see that it'll be a challenge for yourselves of planning transition. I would certainly recommend that it will be a lot easier if your ISCP portfolio is contemporaneous and up to date. It will be much more difficult to go back and sign off or change anything once transition has occurred. So it gives a great opportunity to ensure that your portfolio is up to date at this time. And now I'd like to summarise the webinar as we come to the end of the training session. We hope that you'll find the ideas that we've given today useful in helping you with this major curriculum change. We hope that you recognise that we have gone through the curriculum and the assessment system, and that you now understand the reasoning and the basis of this. We hope that we have explored the whole of the MCR and learning agreement process, its impact upon you as trainees, and how you as a trainee interact with it. We've highlighted how the MCR feeds into the learning agreement process. We've looked at how the MCR self-assessment is important and how honest self-reflection will assist you in completing it. We've discussed how your self-assessment will provide the basis of discussion in the feedback session with the lead CS. We've looked at how planning for transitioning of yourselves in different situations. We've looked at how to mitigate the various challenges related to transition and that the new change of curriculum will bring about. Hopefully, overall, we have discussed and shown the benefits that this new curriculum will bring to you as trainees. The bigger picture is this curriculum allows for progression towards what a day one consultant should be able to do. The new curriculum changes will give you as trainees comprehensive and helpful feedback. That feedback is based on a consensus of multiple professional opinion. From now, the learning agreement will facilitate progression against the capabilities in practice and the GPCs. It will generate an action plan for you moving forward. It will be supportive for you in achieving your goals. Your development skills in reflection and self-improvement will be enhanced. You will learn to identify your own training needs and how they can be met. You'll be able to reflect on how you have progressed by looking at your previous MCRs, and where possible, you will be given the opportunity to progress faster through training by showing your competencies. We're removing what many have felt of the tick boxing elements of the set number of work-based assessments. We just show a slide now to highlight where you will find the trial MCR in your present ISCP. I would really suggest that you undertake this, especially by utilising it as a gap analysis of where you stand now and what training you may have missed due to the COVID pandemic. Thank you.